You got the degree in psychology, and I'm still trying to understand like how that connected to business development.
It ended up turning out that there were two major diversity consulting firms that were headquartered in Cincinnati at that time. I reached out to both of them and just saying, hey, I'm interested in this. I've got a passion for people, helping people. I'm trying to learn, leadership and all these sorts of things. Maybe training, like, is there an opportunity? And ended up turning out that one of them ended up becoming my first job out of college.
What was it that gave you the confidence to call these people and like say, hey, I'm interested? Like, what gave you the confidence?
At that point, I don't even know if I would have called it confidence. It was calling more than confidence.
So I know that you'll agree, enjoying myself while I work is the vibe that I'm trying to be on. So I want to invite you guys to Sidebar ATL here in Atlanta, Georgia. Sidebar, on top of the good food and live music, they have 3 different experiences. That means you can join me in the garden room, in the gold room if you want to try the top of the line hookah, and they also have the dungeon where I hear what happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon. So it's the perfect mix. If you're here on business or you want to blow off some steam after work, you can meet me at Sidebar ATL so that you can have a little bit of dinner and then turn up afterwards if that's your jam. So check us out, 79 Poplar Street here in downtown Atlanta, or you can call 678-800-0741. Let's get it, work and play at the same time, right? Welcome to another episode of the Work and Play podcast. I'm your host, Ariel, and today we have a really, really great guest today. I get excited about these conversations when we get to like nerd out.
Yes.
And so today we're going to get to nerd out about the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship and all of the steps in between, because entrepreneurship is not even an end goal. It's just a destination, right? So without further ado, we will get into it. How do you introduce yourself to people?
Right now I say I'm Nasir Bayan. I'm a corporate mental wellness expert, and I help companies create a culture of mental wellness.
I love it already. How did you get into that though?
I spent 20 years in corporate America, both inside corporate America as an employee and a leader, and then outside of corporate America as a consultant. And 20 years in corporate America, even when people say the word corporate, a lot of times people, when you say that word, people hear pressure, they hear stress, they hear overwhelm. So just to say, I was in corporate for 20 years, people are like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to having that experience and knowing the pressures and the stressors of, being in corporate, whether you're an individual contributor, as a leader, I had that experience. And I'm also a licensed mental health professional, a licensed psychotherapist. And I know the impact that stress has on the body and how we think and how we feel and relationships and all that type of stuff. So I essentially merged those two together and said, hey, how do I marry what I know works in terms of counseling and therapy and kind of use that and take that back into corporate to actually help, people and companies do better.
Yes, because you know the life, you already know what it's like to like live in their shoes, deal with the mental stress. And as a professional, that's where you are now. But what was your role while you were in corporate?
So I was in healthcare primarily, doing business development. So, business development is a mix of sales, customer service, community relations, financials. There's a lot of pieces that go into BD or business development. So when I left, I was a regional director of business development for a Fortune 500 healthcare organization.
I would say that's kind of like the soft side of business, right? Like it wasn't super technical. It takes a lot of natural ability, but then it also, you have to hone some of those skills, like people skills, right? So like for you, when did you decide to go into business? And I don't know if like in college, if there's even a degree. So let's take it back.
Okay.
What did you want to be when you grew up? Like when you were in high school, let's go there, because that's probably where we start to decide what our major is going to be.
In high school, actually, I thought I was going to do graphic design.
Really?
Yeah. My initial thought was, as a kid, I liked art and, had some, kind of creative streaks. So I thought, well, maybe graphic design, that's something that I do. And I realized I was in like my senior year of high school, and I was in AP art, advanced placement art, which is basically all of the, artsy creative kids in school doing art, but just, doing more projects within the term or semester. You would think that I would have really liked it. I didn't, because each week you had to come up with an idea, execute on it, be finished by Friday. And I realized that having to kind of like churn took the fun out of it.
Yeah,
So I
ideas
said,
on demand.
I said graphic design, that's not where I want to go in terms of like a career. So I ended up switching to psychology, and then that's what started to lead me in a different direction.
To a more holistic path. It's interesting that you learn graphic design in that way, because when you think of graphic designers and creatives, you're like, ooh, you get to like just be creative all day. But because of the way you learn in this structured environment, it turns you off.
Yes.
And it's crazy. The other crazy thing is you decided to take a career in the most structured environment you could have ever done. So like, let's make that connection. So you were in graphic design in college or in high school.
Yeah, in high school, thought that was what I was going to major in college. And then like the first, semester, I changed it to psychology.
You changed it to psychology.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wanted to be psychology major when I was in high school. First semester of school, and a lot of black parents are like, how are you gonna make money doing that?
Yes.
So when were you supported in that decision?
Yes, yeah, but yeah, my family, there wasn't any like significant pushback, so I'm definitely like grateful for that. It wasn't until I think the end of undergrad, for me, I did the 5-year plan. I didn't do the 4-year plan, so it was in that 5th year. That internally, not even from like external pressures or family, like I just started thinking, how do I monetize this, turn this into a career that I love and it's also lucrative.
Got you. Are you still trying to get a leg up on your entrepreneurial career? Now, I told you about the Morning Meetup, the community that was created for the betterment of entrepreneurship. And we are cooking up some really cool things. Now, here's the thing. If you join today, you can actually get in for 60% of the original price. So if you join today, all you have to do is download the app, and I provided the link below so that you can join us. We have community, we have a book club, and it's the largest group that meets every single day, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. to literally get a head start on entrepreneurship. So if you're still trying to grow, you don't know what your business is going to be, but you know you want to be an entrepreneur, this is the community for you. So check out the Morning Meetup, click the link below, download the app, and join us today. Now, up until that point, you just had been enjoying the classes. What part of the psychology education did you take to most?
It was, I love people. I absolutely love people. Warts and all, the good, the bad, and just getting a deeper understanding of why we are the way that we are in the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. So that piece, as well as I started basically like facilitating like on-campus programs and that sort of stuff. And like I realized I just enjoyed that people interaction piece of it. So I said, okay, there's something here, and I need to kind of keep following that instinct.
I'm with you, right? But there's so much more to psychology than people realize. Like, I only took one psychology class. I think, like, as a business major, you're required to take one. And I think it was Sigmund Freud. Hopefully I'm not putting myself out of the mental health community, because I think it was Sigmund Freud who, no, it was Pavlov, because we learned about the
conditioning?
Yes, conditioning, right?
Yes.
And that's probably what got me interested in the degree, right? But there's so much more behind the wall. So as a mental health professional, what are some of the things that just differentiate you as a educated psychologist versus the stuff that people think is so second nature? Because there's education. Like you have, like, which class was your favorite?
Ooh, which class was my favorite?
Yeah.
You forced me to go back.
I'm trying to get in there. You see, I'm like, hold up, let me.
Which class was my favorite?
Yeah.
There isn't one that sticks out yet. I'm gonna have to sit on that because I haven't literally until this moment even thought about that question.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So and I would love to explore it, because when you say I love people, I think that what I'm learning in the helping profession, there are different types of ways to help people. Like, there are different ways to help mental illnesses. There's medication. There's physical, like, I can't even think of the terminology, but RTMS, right? Where you put the electrodes on your brain. There's talk therapy. But then that all stems from a different class,
gotcha.
so to speak, right? So we'll get into it a little bit more.
I'm sure
it's gonna come up. Yeah,
I'm tracking. Yeah.
So you got the degree in psychology, and I'm still trying to understand, like, how that connected to business development. So what was your experience like when you're facing graduation, with or without a job?
without a job, I'm trying to go back and remember I don't think without one when I actually graduated.
Yeah.
I went to undergrad at University of Cincinnati, UC. So this is Cincinnati, Ohio. And again, having done, facilitating lead and led groups on campus, with other students, I realized I really enjoyed that. So I thought, well, is there a way to marry that into like a career? So I started thinking, well, consulting or training or, any of the stuff around what they call DEI now, diversity, equity, inclusion, like how can I make that work? It ended up turning out that there were two major diversity consulting firms that were headquartered in Cincinnati at that time. I reached out to both of them. I'm however old you are, when you graduate, 21.
Yeah.
And just saying, hey, I'm interested in this. I've got a passion for people, helping people. I'm trying to learn, leadership and all these sorts of things. Maybe training, like, is there an opportunity? And ended up turning out that one of them ended up becoming my first job out of college, one of the pioneering diversity consulting firms. And the other one, later on in my career, I ended up doing some contracting work with them for several years. So that was how that connect happened. Yeah.
Did you, up until this point, had you had any career development, any type of coaching? Did you go to the guidance counselor? What was it that gave you the confidence to call these people and say, hey, I'm interested? What gave you the confidence?
At that point, I don't even know if I would have called it confidence. It was calling more than confidence. It was just, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to go. It makes logical sense. It doesn't hurt. The worst that can be said is no, and just, you don't have a job now that you're graduating. You need to do it. So that was it. At that point, I don't even know if I would have called it confidence. It was just, this is the next logical step.
And you also said calling. So as I'm listening to you making these decisions, we haven't necessarily tapped into your foundation much, right? Up until this point, we know you were interested in graphic design. Mm-hmm. We know you decided not to do that. We know you also decided to go into psychology. And you took it upon yourself to handle your own career, so to speak. Because some people would have graduated just kind of floundered, which some people do because they don't have that wherewithal. So growing up, who was it? You said you were supported when you decided to become a psychologist. So when you were growing up, what was the idea of career success or the careers that were available to you?
The answer to me again, what careers did I think about growing up?
Yeah, or yes. And were your parents involved in showing you what careers were available? Was it school that was these are the jobs? Did you even?
Not consciously. It wasn't it wasn't a lot of conscious, I think, exposure. I mean, I absorbed stuff, but it wasn't, I don't think, that much of an intentional thing. That being said, I'm literally going back in the time machine as you're asking the question. My mom at certain times would talk about, owning your own business, or that is a possibility. So I think that, I don't know if it planted a seed or kind of opened up the possibility of that's something that years, didn't manifest until years later, but that's how that comes to me immediately. She did some entrepreneurial stuff, some network marketing, and yeah.
Now, network marketing opens the door for a lot of people into entrepreneurship. So, and even though you didn't do it, the power of learning a lesson through someone else's life is invaluable. Okay, so mom was into network marketing. Yes. Did she have a 9-to-5 as well?
She did have a 9-to-5.
Okay, and what about dad?
The 9-to-5 had been in corporate before.
Okay.
And his 9-to-5 at that point wasn't in corporate, but had been in corporate before. So I got a lot of 9-to-5 exposure, and then some non-traditional exposure.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that, non-traditional.
Yeah.
I'm learning along the way. It's like you are developing through osmosis.
Yes.
Because there's not a lot of you should do this, you need to do that. Something inside of you is well, I need to get a job. Nobody's sitting here what are you going to do to make money? How are you going to graduate? Nobody's pressuring you in this moment.
Correct.
That's dope. Okay. Yeah. So we're really following our own path at this point.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so you were a consultant, you were employee at the first company, you did contract work for the second company. What types of projects did you do? Because you're only like 22, 3, 4 at this time. What type of projects did you work on at these companies?
So when I first started out, I was a client relationship manager. So you're in the sales side of a consulting firm. So I'm there, again, 21, 22 years old, and I'm essentially calling HR directors or HR managers and saying, hey, we've got these consulting services or these training services that your company may need or your employees may need. Can we talk? So I'm essentially selling our services. All the while that's happening, and I'm on the phone trying to do that, I'm seeing the seasoned trainers, facilitators and trainers do their thing. I get a chance to be a part of certain trainings, to sit in on some of them. And eventually I'm like, I really like this training, arena, because I could see magic, learning, growth happening. I could see people being challenged.
Yeah.
And it was exciting. It was very exciting. So eventually I ended up kind of, saying or asking the leaders, is it possible to transition from customer relationship manager and that kind of sales side of the consulting firm to training? Yeah. Can I co-facilitate, or do some junior apprenticing, like learn what these seasoned trainers know? And essentially they were like, yes, we can definitely do that. Like there's, and we love to have folks that are interested in training and delivery. So that was how I ended up, I guess, formally moving into, corporate training or workshop delivery.
Again, you took it upon yourself to ask for an apprenticeship, which is one of the boss moves that I talk about. Like on my social media, I would literally say, if you want to do something, a boss move is essentially asking to do something for free and getting paid the knowledge and experience of the people who have done it for 20 years.
Invaluable.
Man.
Invaluable.
And you took it upon yourself to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
it sounds really great when you said, I'm like, I guess I did, but I'm like, you're just, when you're, I think at any, especially early, especially earlier in one's career, you're figuring it out. We're figuring out, we're making the next best step based off of what we know. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but we're just making the next best step. So I appreciate the positive, framing, but I'm like, we're just moving forward.
That's amazing. Well, you know what? You're welcome, because I am listening to your story and I'm like, you are making moves that a lot of people our age and younger and currently don't have the confidence to do. Because here's the thing, I grew up with career readiness training, right? So there are things that I knew to do. So you just have to have the confidence to do what you're being told to do. Meanwhile, you're taking steps that people like you didn't even know was somewhere in a silo to do, but you're just kind of innately doing it for yourself. Yeah. So that's why I see it that way, And honestly, I think that might be the difference. That's like one of the bigger differences between corporate and entrepreneurs. We have this structure, this intel, right, as corporate employees, but then the entrepreneurs, they just do. And they learn through executing.
Yeah.
So here you are at this point in your career. Was entrepreneurship at any point in your mind, or were you still just like in the beginning of like, I just want to learn how to be corporate?
It was 70% I want to learn corporate. Like I want to know this place and what the rules are, written and unwritten. I want to add value. I want to get better. So it was 70% that, and then 30% maybe thinking about entrepreneurship, or maybe even 80-20. Like most of it was I want to, show up and add value. And then maybe 20% entrepreneurship. Okay,
got you. So how long were you in this role? Like, well, how long did it take you to get from like, I'm interested in learning about training to like becoming a trainer? And then how long were you in that environment?
It was pretty much immediate. Like when I said, hey, I would like to be able to move into the training side of the business, the yes was pretty immediate. And then to start actually co-facilitating trainings was immediate. So that happened pretty quickly. I was only at that firm for just about a year. Before leaving Cincinnati and then moving down to Atlanta. So we're talking about 02, maybe going into 03.
Okay, yeah. 02, 03. Now, what sparked your decision to move from Cincinnati to Atlanta?
I looked around and I said, I was looking for me in the future. Essentially. And I remember talking to one of the VPs of the company, older very accomplished black man, vice president of consulting at that point, long career in education, great career in corporate. And I said, I'm kind of thinking about moving to Atlanta. I've got some family down there. One of my sisters, was down here. I said, I've got some family down there. I'm just thinking about it. He was like, kind of, long story short, he said, if I was you, like, I wouldn't even think about it. Like, go. Because there was a lot of opportunity. A lot of young professionals, a lot of young black and brown professionals. So, opportunity. Yeah, I came down here a couple of times to visit, and I remember driving back to Cincinnati and thinking, why am I still living in Cincinnati? Like, I need to be in the A. So that was what got me from Cincinnati, Ohio, down here to Atlanta.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because that feeling, for a lot of people, that feeling of why am I? You start to question it, like, is this life? Am I supposed to be here? Mm-hmm. It started the first time, it sounds like, was while you were in Cincinnati. Uh-huh. So like, what sparked or triggered that idea of like, is this like what it's gonna be like, or I want more for myself? Like, what was life like in Cincinnati? I've never been.
At that point, we're talking 20 years ago, so I think it has definitely changed since. But conservative, relatively conservative. I couldn't look and see many examples. And it's not that they weren't there, but many examples of young black professionals, let alone mid to later career black professionals, where I could look and say, like, I want to be him. I want to have that achievement. And that wasn't as prevalent. So that, I think, dissatisfaction made me think, like, where are the other me, so to speak? Like, where are other young black professionals at? And I want to be there. And it ended up being Atlanta. So that was I think what kind of spawned it.
I'm glad I asked. So you took it upon yourself to ask, hey, let me get training. And I'm assuming you enjoyed the work, but as you're explaining it, you just didn't see enough representation. So while you wanted to add value to the corporate space and like learn the rules and excel, it sounds like there might have been a ceiling for you at some point.
Not necessarily within the company, but in the city at large. So it wasn't so much the consulting firm, but the city, like just Cincinnati in general.
Gosh, like, I need to break out of this city.
It was the vibe. It was like, I'm not seeing enough of myself reflected for me to internally say, this is where I need to be, this is where I need to stay. And it's, of course, when you're young, like you just graduated, there's boundless energy, there's limitless opportunity. It's like, let's get it. So that was
capitalize on that.
Yeah.
That's dope. Okay, got you. Bring you to Atlanta, the Mecca of America. We are happy to have you, right? You're here, right? And so you, the land of opportunities. What's one of the, like, how did you get your footing when you moved to a completely different city? And was it just you by yourself, or?
No. So one of my sisters lived down here and still lives down here. Okay. And she said, like, hey, I'm down here. Like, you got a place to stay. If you're considering a move, like, you can make the move. Like, we can facilitate making it happen. And I'm like definitely grateful for it, because that made it easier to make that move. But I had to find my way. Like, I didn't come down here like, oh, I've got a job or a gig lined up. It was just, I know that I need to move. So to answer your question, it wasn't just me. I had my sister, I had other extended family that was here, which is very helpful. And then consequently, within 2, maybe 3 years of me moving down here, several, like 2 or 3 of my close buddies, like my close friends from undergrad, unplanned ended up moving down here. So it was like undergrad part 2.
Oh man. And this is, I don't want to date you, but this is still around the time where Freak Week was still happening.
I think this was post, this is 03, 04. Yeah, this is post.
Okay, because 2000.
It was an enjoyable time, but this was post, it was post Freak Week. Yeah.
Okay, so you're a young man in Atlanta. You're not only just a professional, because we've talked a lot about your career, but you're also like a young man in Atlanta. Your I want to say colleagues, but what do you call it? Your peers from college came to Atlanta with you, so it's like home away from home, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
So what is it like for you to get your first job here? Like, what company did you decide to work for?
So my first job here was as an external consultant. So when I say, I've spent 20 years in corporate, that was one foot in the W-2 world as an employee. That was another foot in the 1099 world as an external consultant. So when I moved down here, 03, I think by 04, I, again, through grace, as well as some networks with family, ended up coming on as an external consultant to Cox Enterprises, the multimedia company. They had a leadership training that they were doing. They wanted to bring in some external consultants to come in and, train their managers, and, came in and got that opportunity. So that was me, stepping into the world of, I'm a semi-entrepreneur. Now I've got my LLC, and I'm now, saying, well, I can take on corporate clients and do some training and facilitation work, and still figuring it out. I'm a few years in at that point. So struggling with sometimes imposter syndrome. I'm the youngest at that point, youngest person in the, in some of the rooms, and I'm training people that might be 10 or sometimes 20 years my senior, and just figuring out, but still, there was a positive that I enjoyed that kept me kind of moving forward.
That's amazing. You can talk about that experience all day, because the word consultant can be intimidating for a lot of people. So you mentioned it, you kind of touched on it just a little bit of how you're young in your career, you're training these executives who are 16 or plus years older than you. What is your framework at the time? When did you start to niche into okay, I'm an external consultant, this is what I offer?
It really came from where I felt like I was had the most competency. So if a person said, well, what do you do consulting on? If I say I do training, I'm a corporate trainer, and people say, well, what do you do training on? I would generally say it's leadership and diversity, or diversity and inclusion, because those are the two areas where I feel like there was the most maybe skill and passion to move into versus, something else. Gotcha. So I feel like it was honest, it was integrity, and I enjoyed it. So that was I guess you say, niche down within the world of consulting.
Got you. Yeah. And how did that differentiate you from the other types of consultants who didn't focus on leadership and diversity? Clients, there's kind of name recognition. If they know that that's what you do, then maybe you're more likely to, get an engagement. I don't know. Other than that, I just know that I've felt like that's where I needed to go. So leadership. Well, the reason I ask is because a lot of people have a fascination with the HR side of things, how to get in, how to become a trainer, and HRs and HR departments and companies, they hire people to do all types of training. So while you decided to go the leadership route, the other routes, what are some of the other things that people get hired for that you decided, nah, that's not my cup of tea?
As consultants, everything. There's you could put the word consultant is so broad that it's almost like it can mean almost anything. I'm a business consultant, I'm a lifestyle consultant, I'm a but within corporate, you could consult on anything. You could do executive consulting, you could do team building, you could do strategic planning, you could do project management.
Got it.
You could be the external expert on almost anything and say, I've put my shingle out and I think I have something that can add value to a company. So it could be almost anything. For me, it just ended up specifically kind of being leadership and inclusion training.
That makes sense. Okay, now that I understand the cup of teas that are available, I see strategic, I see if you wanted to do organizational effectiveness, those are the different opportunities. And you're nah. I'm gonna focus on building these leaders into being better leaders.
Yeah. Yep.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So then you're an external consultant, and then you decide to be in business development. How did you get your first in as a business development person? That's the consultant. That's one foot in the 1099 world, right. But I still have one foot in the W-2 world. So I ended up, during this time that I'm doing the consulting, I ended up going back to grad school. Okay. So that's the missing piece. I'm going back to grad school. I moved from Atlanta up to Athens, Georgia, and go to UGA. Oh, nice.
So go dogs. There you go. So I ended up getting my master's degree in professional counseling and human development.
Okay.
When I thought about it, I said, something inside said it's time to go back. And I essentially was teetering between human resources and organizational development, like go back and do a graduate program in that, or you could do a graduate program in like counseling. And I knew that I enjoyed both because both of them deal with people. And I sat down and I asked myself the question, Nasir, which one would you do for free? Not because you don't want to be well compensated, but just because it resonates with who you are on a very deep level. And that was what tipped the scales between, you know, HR and organizational development and counseling. So I said, all right, I'll go, you know, and get this graduate degree in counseling and see where it leads. I didn't know what it was going to lead to at that point, but that was what tipped the scales.
Got it. And counseling one, because while your hands were going up, I thought organizational effectiveness or organizational development one, but counseling one.
So the link is, you know, once you're done with once I was done with school, most people, you know, say, hey, I'm going to, you know, go through the process of becoming licensed as a counselor or therapist. Like I'll go through that process. And it's a multi-year process. I got provisionally licensed and I moved from Athens back down to Atlanta, and I was looking for jobs. I ended up, my first job, you know, post-graduate school was working at a community mental health agency where I was, you know, doing, you know, individual and some group counseling services, so like doing direct service. And that's what got me into mental health. And then after that job, I ended up realizing that wasn't the only thing that was there, and ended up working for a hospital that was linked to a Fortune 500 healthcare company. I didn't know at that point that there was a link. I just thought, hey, I want to serve. How can I serve more? And that's what moved me from mental health into business development, meaning I'm working at this hospital and seeing patients, like doing direct care service. And at that point, the director of business development came up to me and she was like, you've got this, you know, master's degree and you've got this sales background, and have you ever thought about business development? I didn't think about that. I thought direct service. And I'm like, well, let's try it out. So that's what got me into BD, or business development. Yeah.
I got to take a breather.
It's a lot.
I have to take a breather because, like, one, what I know about business development is you don't go to school for it. You don't knock on the door. You don't apply for it. That's something that you're kind of chosen for because you have to understand the business side of it.
Yes.
But you also have to understand I want to say empathetic side, the experience side of it. Like you have to understand the product, the customer's experience from start to finish, and then you also have to understand like the business side of it. So the reason I say I had to take a breather is because you're following your intuition, so to speak, from sales to the counseling degree to like finding your job to this community counseling department, like nonprofit. Was it?
It was the first job. The community mental health job was a nonprofit. The job after that was a for-profit hospital.
Yes,
that was linked to the Fortune 500, and that was where the BD, you know, kind of career spawned.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I just had to take a breather for it because, like, these are moves that people are coached on, right? And so as you're learning about mental health, one thing that I've learned is as I got into the DSM-5 and I'm learning about these things, I started learning about my own mental health.
Yeah.
And these transitions at every single point has its own challenge on our mindset. So for you, what's your gauge on mental health at this point, and how did it develop over time during this span of here, then here, then here, and up here? What's your development like mentally?
That's a good question. There are three things, or two things. One is maybe the inner journey and the outer journey. The inner journey is, and I say this in hindsight, some, not all, but some people end up getting, I think, drawn to or called to helping professions or healing professions. One, because there's a passion and a heart to serve, but also because we have our own healing work to do. Yeah. In hindsight, I'm like, well, like you had your own healing work to do. So it was, you know, I'm grateful that I did a graduate degree in counseling. I remember being in one of our classes, you know, graduate school classes, and one of the professors saying this is like the first semester, saying if you're going to be a counselor or therapist, you probably should, do counseling or therapy, like get your own counseling or therapy. I remember sitting in class and thinking, like, nodding my head, thinking, well, that makes logical sense. And then I hear it again, I'm thinking, like, well, that makes this logical sense. Like, yeah, well, of course. And then the 100th time, who knows, that I heard it, it was like me thinking, like, I wonder if he's talking specifically to me. And,
wow.
Internally making the decision of, one, you need to tap in, like with a counselor, with a therapist, and at minimum, experience what it's like if you're going to be a counselor or therapist. And at maximum, like, get your own healing jump off, like do your own work, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I'm super grateful for it. I mean, I'm grateful beyond words. So I say that to say that was some of the inner journey. When you say, what's your perspective on mental health? That was some of the inner journey. The outer journey is I now look at or make a distinction between mental illness, mental health, and mental wellness.
Ooh.
Meaning, mental illness is something that is real, and it's real in its consequences, but sometimes it's something that societally we want to avoid. Like, I don't want to, I don't want that. Mental health, especially during the pandemic, is something that I think the awareness is rising about. And a lot of people are saying, hey, this is something that, I'm aware of and I want to manage. I want to manage my mental health. I want to have good mental health, which I think is great and much needed. That being said, to me, this bucket over here, mental wellness, is the recognition that it's a resource that can be tapped into and optimized both as an individual, let alone in organization. So I make that distinction just in here of mental illness versus mental health versus mental wellness. So when I say I'm a corporate mental wellness expert, I'm focused on here on how do we optimize your mental wellness, our mental wellness, for amazing outcomes, amazing results, more fulfilling lives, the whole nine.
The whole nine.
Yeah.
Ooh, now we get to geek out a little bit, because like when you bring this topic, the difference between mental illness, mental health, and mental wealth, my biggest pet peeve when it comes to the mental health space is everything resorts to being on a spectrum. The DSM-5 got everybody ADHD, got everybody calling themselves like all of these things and labeling themselves. And I honestly believe that some mental health professionals take the liberties to diagnose people too soon. So, like, as we talk about that, like, do you differentiate? Do you have an opinion on like how like the mental, because I feel like mental illness really, or the DSM-5 really belongs in that mental illness bucket, but I don't necessarily see it in these other buckets. However, I feel like people take ADHD and they put it across all these buckets. So what's your opinion?
Agreed. There's I think a lot more confusion than there is clarity when some of these things around mental health come up. And sometimes a word or diagnosis kind of gets adopted by, the larger society, the larger culture, and people just throw it around. Like, I've got ADHD, or, I'm bipolar today, or the weather's bipolar, or, I got PTSD because it's stressful at the job, and people would just use it without it necessarily being linked to clinical criteria.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's more to say other than, it's there's more confusion than I think clarity. Eventually, I think we will get there, because as a society, we're still becoming more aware of what mental health, let alone mental wellness, looks like, where it's tangible. It's like we know what it is or what it isn't, but it's a learning curve. That's
a learning curve for a lot of people, the mental health profession as well as just society. But yeah, I think that's probably like as far as in depth as far as the DSM-5. And for those of you guys who don't know, it's the diagnostic manual for we're in version 5, right? For those of you guys who aren't mental health professionals. But you mentioned, like, when you started your story, you said I spent 20 years in corporate. And when you hear that, you hear stress.
Yes.
You hear all these different things. And you mentioned the PTSD that a lot of people do resonate with when they leave corporate. So if we get into that a little bit, one, your perspective on it. So what I've learned, and there's literature on it, but it's not in the DSM-5. Corporate trauma or corporate tension, stress disorder. It's not in the DSM-5. It's not diagnosable, but it is a true experience. And for some people, they have to recover for 20 years after they've spent 20 years.
Speak on it.
So like for you, you mentioned stress, you mentioned these things. What was one of those times where your mental health was truly challenged in the corporate space?
It was probably 2 years before I actually ended up leaving. I was working at sometimes 70-hour weeks, 65, 70-hour weeks. And I had, from the outside looking in, a lot of external success, but there wasn't a lot of inner success or happiness. I was stressed like out of my mind. I couldn't enjoy I wasn't enjoying life. Waking up at 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm immediately thinking about, okay, what's due? What's the deliverable? What needs to be done so that we can, have the meeting or meet the deadline? And on one hand, going through challenges helps you to see what you're made of or how you respond to different things. So from that standpoint, I'm grateful of hey, you had that experience and you know where your edges are. But it also was instructive of, I think, having to learn boundaries, prioritizing self-care. Like, when are you giving too much versus you need to kind of give more in here. And about 2 years before I left, that was probably the height of just being really stressed. And again, where the inner didn't match the outer. Again, outside looking in, nice job, 6-figure salary, very ego, boosting title, I'm the such and such and such and such. And people are like, oh, well, that sounds important. But if you ask the question like, well, are you happy? Or how's your relationships with everyone in your life? It's like, well, I'm working a lot. So I'm grateful for it in hindsight of it just helped me to get more clear on what was and is most important. So.
As a mental health professional, I can hear your ownership of your healing and your health journey. But when it comes to people who are not mental health professionals and they're experiencing that corporate environment, it just feels like hell. Right? The way even how you talk, it just sounds healthy in hindsight. But for a lot of people, that 2 year mark before you left, well, it's hell for a lot of people. And the serenity prayer comes to mind because there are things that we can control, right? And that's the stuff that you are taking ownership, and I hear it. But then there are things that we cannot control. So when you get into that moment 2 years before you left, what were the things? Was it a boss? Was it the policies? What was causing you the most stress at the time that just was out of your control?
Ooh, that's a good question. The two things that come to mind were the quantity of work. It felt never ending of there's always something. There isn't a lot of reprieve where you can just breathe for a second and say, okay, I got the weekend to recharge, or I have this extended holiday to recharge, or I have some just natural downtime. So the quantity of work was something that I couldn't control, that, seemingly felt like it kept on coming. And then the other thing was the culture. I could control me, but I couldn't control culture. I couldn't control what happened in other parts of the organization or policies or decisions. And that was, it was rough. It was challenging. So those two things, the culture as well as just the quantity of work, were the things where I realized I couldn't control them. And I think it ended up shifting, me, forcing me to kind of go inward to get more clarity. Got you.
And at this point, how were you making the decision to leave? Did you have an exit strategy? Did you say, now I'm going to get up out of here? What was your process like when that 2 year mark hit? The best way to support the Work and Play podcast is by subscribing to the YouTube channel and by going to your favorite podcast player to subscribe and rate the Work and Play podcast. That's all you have to do. So if you are liking the Work and Play podcast, the content, the stories that we're sharing, and you know that this will help someone, go ahead and share the content to someone who could actually use it and help them on their journey to transition from corporate into entrepreneurship. Now let's get back into the episode.
It was a divinely facilitated exit.
Ooh, don't you like how he is with the word?
See what I did there?
Yes, I love it.
My initial thought wasn't I'm going to leave corporate. I've been with one company for 11 years. There was a competitor that essentially courted me and said, hey, we'd like you to come over here and still do business development with us. So now I'm here at a new company, still doing in healthcare, doing business development, leading a team, like enjoying the people aspect of it, but still, trying to navigate corporate. And right around that time, COVID hit. Like literally me making a transition from the old job to the new job, like within a week or two is when COVID just, jumped up. So I'm at the what was my last job for a few months. And eventually, I'm speaking, paraphrasing, but essentially they said, this 6-figure salary that we're paying you, we might want to make some moves because we got to pull back and shut some things down and dial back.
Okay.
And I said, okay, like I get it. I'm grateful that my wife and I have been like pretty intentional in terms of like our money and finances and savings and, little debt and those sorts of things. So, but it was a divinely facilitated exit from corporate. So,
do
you like that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what prompted the move, or was the details behind the move. I'm grateful for it, like grateful beyond words, because one, it gave me like some space to be able to like breathe, think, feel like what's going on in here, let alone like do that inner, just when that inner work where you just try to get clarity of like what's really going on. And I took the time to get clear. I knew I was going to go back into doing consulting. So I said, hey, you've been doing consulting this time, getting that one foot in the 1099 world. So instead of that being part-time, you'll ramp that back up to full-time. That was a ready-made decision. But I didn't know what else was going to be there. So kind of going inside, what came out was I started my private practice. I've been a licensed therapist for a while, but I hadn't had my own practice where I could serve clients directly, as well as figuring out like how else am I called to, what other work am I called to do that's deeply purposeful?
Yeah. I understand. So the divinely facilitated exit, that's peace. A lot of people, they pray for one of those. And then when they don't get it, they're like, all right, God, let me just put my parachute on. We own it.
Yes.
And that's everybody's journey, right? So as you're moving through your journey, you mentioned your wife, and I'm curious about because having someone along the journey with you is really helpful. For those who don't have a family, they resort to a therapist, they resort to a coach, things like that, but you have a wife at home. So I'm curious, what role or what was it like having someone else on this journey? Because whether it was a burden or a support or anywhere in between, what was it like for you making these life decisions and these life moves with a wife along your side?
Helpful and challenging. The helpful piece is I think the beauty of being married or any partnership is your partner can see things you don't see. So that's the beauty of the help piece of like she's able to see things where I could mention a situation, say, am I tripping? Am I seeing this right? Or am I, does this move make sense? So that was the helpful piece. The challenging piece was to go from having a good job in corporate, 9 to 5, very good money, to that's gone. The pressure, the stress, internally, like I felt that. If I was a single man, I don't think I would have felt it in the same way.
You don't think so? Because did you feel responsible for her well-being? Is that why?
Yep.
Got you.
Yeah.
And for you to say that, do you think she would say like she expected that from you, or did you just take that on as a person?
I know that I took it on. I don't know if she would say yes, I expected it or not, but I took it on. Like the part inside that says I'm protector, I'm provider. I've got to have a vision and be leading forward. To lose a former identity, it's challenging. So to have that identity as, I work in corporate and I've got this job and this title and that sort of thing, like that was a part of my identity. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had to go through that identity shift. So for example, a month or two outside of, formally leaving corporate as a W-2, when people would say, oh, what do you do? The first thing that would come to my mind to say was, oh, I used to be the such and such and such and such at work at such and such and such.
Yes.
And then eventually there was this like dissonance of like, well, that's not what you do right now. So it prompted the question, who are you now? Not what did you used to do? And that was a process. And it was challenging to like figure that out and I think own the identity as an entrepreneur. Like that was the piece of like, I own it now. I'm like, yes, I'm an entrepreneur. But that wasn't initially the case. Sometimes to say it, I would notice that even if my words said it, internally something was like, you haven't fully integrated that into your identity.
Yeah.
The same thing when I started my private practice to say, oh, I'm a licensed psychotherapist in private practice. I say it now because it's here. But initially it was like, well, I'm opening up it was like there was a part of me that was still trying to own it fully.
And did you have your therapist at this time?
I wasn't yes, and I've had the same one and I'll tap in
over the last 20 years
as needed. Not over the last 20 years, for the last 12
years.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the math. Do the math.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking these are identity crisis, shifts, these things, these are heavy. And if you didn't necessarily work it out with your therapist, were you giving yourself exercises to like match the two? Or once you identified the problem, what was the solution that you identified?
What was the first question? The tapping in with therapists versus we're just doing self-work?
Self-work. Were you partnering with a therapist at this time, or were you doing a lot of self-work?
It was both. So I did tap in with my therapist and say, hey, we haven't met in a while. I might need to
brush up on some sessions.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, so she and I did reconnect, which was great. And doing the self-work, like realizing like this is a growth edge. You have to live it now. So it was both.
Got you. And what was some of the things that helped you make sense of what you were going through?
Oh, that's a good question. Pausing to get clear or get still. That's probably the biggest one. There's other stuff in that, but pausing enough to get still, like literally pausing and like taking a breath or two or three and like just checking in, saying, what's going on here? What's going on in my head, my heart, and my hands? What am I thinking? What's going on in here? And then how's that showing up in my hands, my behavior? So doing that kind of head, heart, hands check-in.
Head, heart, hands check-in. I like that.
Yeah.
That sounds very practical. Wanting to pause was probably one of my biggest issues in corporate, because I felt like I was right in front of a moving train. I'm like, I just need to like get off of the train tracks, and I couldn't pause because everything was moving full speed ahead. So practically, right, I would imagine that also helps with you when you're working with clients. How do you help somebody tap into that, head, heart, hands exercise, and how does it actually work?
As needed. Sometimes if I'm working with a client, we jump on virtual. We jump on the teletherapy session, and I can see that their nervous system's kind of activated. There's kind of maybe carrying some stress or a little bit of anxiety. Sometimes I'll kind of prompt and say, let's just take a moment and give yourself permission to arrive. Give yourself permission to arrive fully. Not only your body, your thoughts, what's going on, and even just someone like prompting that can help, let alone in the middle of like a session. Sometimes, I may say, well, let's pause, like check in and let me know not only what's going on from the neck up, like I'm thinking this and I'm thinking that, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that, but from the neck down, like what, if anything, may you be feeling, feelings, emotions, what, if anything, is going on in your body? Like sometimes we have stress or tension holding patterns of like, oh, this gets tight, or I noticed that there's an ache here. And just being aware of those can be really powerful in terms of like just the body kind of doing its natural healing that it ultimately wants to do on its own. So just prompting it whenever whenever I kind of see that it's needed, just in a moment.
Giving them permission to be here.
Yes.
Yeah. That it just makes me feel like I know exactly what you mean, because if I'm in a session with a client or with my coach or my therapist and you're here, but my mind is so far from having this conversation with you.
That's it.
So giving myself permission to just come here, have a conversation, get centered.
That's it.
And then pause.
That's it. Simple.
Dang, you're good. I can feel it already. I can feel it. It's dope. So then, like, as we're thinking about, like, you as a psychotherapist, right? What are some of the transformations that you like to work on nowadays? Like, you've been through your own experiences. You resonate with that corporate stress, right? The transformations that someone is looking for, what are those that they come to you for mostly?
Most of my clients are, I guess you could say, the old me, meaning most of my clients are primarily Black professionals, like either working professionals or some are entrepreneurs that have their own companies and want or need or use that therapy space to kind of tap in, whether it's on work or business stuff, relationship stuff, healing stuff. Like I had just some old stuff coming up that I want to heal or work through. So I kind of say I'm now serving the old me, corporate professionals and entrepreneurs. And then what was the other part of the?
What's the transformation look like? Feeling better, stressing less, engaging more, like doing, I call it the inner work that leads to outer transformation. The inner work that leads to outer transformation.
Yes.
So if this is your old you, do they come with like visible like physical changes that need to be made, or do they somehow change on the inside and then you realize, oh, you look like a different person?
Normally it's the latter. And it is simple but no less powerful. Sometimes, all we need is someone to help hold the space for us. Like someone to just, in this hour, in this moment, to be there and be present, and essentially non-verbally communicate. Of course, it's a confidential space, but you're safe. I'm here. Whatever comes up is okay. If something doesn't come up, like that's okay. And again, y'all nerd out about this stuff. Our nervous systems always kind of communicate, so to speak, with other people. It's not something we're trying to do. Our nervous systems naturally look for signs of either welcome or warning. Like, oh, like this is welcoming or this is warning, or friend or foe, or this is like, this person is part of my tribe, or this person might be a threat.
Yeah.
I say that to say, when we're with someone that is kind of holding that space, it can help take us from here, down to here, down to here, down to here. And we like that. Our nervous system, physiologically, our bodies need that. And it can be really, really powerful, really healing, really, really therapeutic.
You were mentioning like you're scanning the room for the friend or foe. And I remember before we did the podcast, we were talking about like the fight or flight.
Yeah.
Like the reactions that we have when we're up against stress. And though fight or flight, those are primitive reactions like that. What the amygdala tells us that, hey, we have to fight for ourselves, or we have to flight, like we have to run. My personal opinion is like, we don't, not even a person, in the environment of corporate, you don't have the option of either. Like, you're not fighting somebody and you're not running. So like, when you're working with your clients, how do you help them navigate through that situation? First of all, do you agree or disagree, or what's your opinion on, that fight or flight, sense coming up while you're in corporate? And then how do you help your clients work through it?
I guess I'll go in reverse order. My sense is it's absolutely real. If either there's something that's not welcoming or even threatening in the environment, or that we perceive as threatening in the environment, then again, like I said, our amygdala is going to come online. It's going to dump cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine into the system and activate that fight or flight response. So inside here, our body is going through a lot. The fight response being, metaphorically speaking, I'm gonna put on these boxing gloves and we got to do something. We got to square up. Or the flight response being, lace up these track shoes, Usain Bolt, like I'm gone.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying to say, neurochemically, there's a lot that's happening in here. And sometimes it's not noticed in corporate environments. A person can they might not understand that the behavior they're seeing is a person's in a fight or flight response. Again, our nervous systems are built to do that. And the kind of interesting thing is, most times we're going to over-index what we perceive to be the level of threat. So if the level of threat or challenge is a level 5, we're more likely to think it's a level 7. And the difference between the 5 and the 7 is extra stress that I'm carrying, like in my body. It's kind of that, what they say, better to mistake a stick for a snake than a snake for a stick. Like better to think, okay, there's that stick. Let me run this. Let me run this way.
Yeah.
And all that stuff's happening in here. Yeah. So to answer your question, it's absolutely real, and it doesn't only happen in individuals. It happens in organizations. Yeah.
So how do you help your clients, like, one, recognize that and then work through it?
Individually, again, holding the space, being able to speak to what is real, and to let them know that they're not alone, or that what they may be experiencing is real in here. Like, I'm not on the job with them, but I know that in here, fight or flight can be happening, or even freeze can be happening, where a person kind of dissociates or numbs out.
Yeah.
That's real in here.
Yeah.
So being able to speak to it, to speak to what they're experiencing, is really helpful in terms of like individually, and much needed.
You mentioned the freeze, which we didn't even go too deep into that, but I remember even before we did the podcast, you were saying like freeze is the worst response out of the 3: fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, definitely the most intense. Like if I'm on a scale of 0 to 10, like let's say fight or flight is maybe up to level 7. But freeze is like 8, 9, and 10. It's where my body, metaphorically speaking, is saying, I can't. Like, it's too overwhelming. It's too much. So the best thing I can do, the smartest thing I can do, the wisest thing I can do is just shut down. Yeah. I'm here, but I'm not here.
Which is the least healthy, because when you're trying to figure out how to navigate whatever you're going through in corporate, if you freeze, it's like you can't even hear the feedback that somebody's telling you. You can't even understand what you can do to change your situation. Yeah. You're like, lights are off, the eyes are on, but I'm not here. Yeah. And I feel like that's when self-sabotage, because you can hear what people are saying, obviously, but you just can't make the connection between what can I do to make the situation better. I'm just like, hyper stimulated at all times. And it really, like, I would say, affects our decision-making skills. Because now we don't even know, like, it's like looking at the doggone train getting ready to hit you, and you're just like, and it hits you anyway. That's why the PIP happens. Yes. You can't get yourself off of a PIP. Yes. You end up getting fired, and then you're looking back at a situation that you feel like you could have had some control over, but you didn't. And I would say, from your perspective, from a mental health perspective, do you ever deal with people who end up with like that regret? Like they watched the whole debacle happen, they got fired from a job, or they couldn't get off of a PIP, and they feel like they could have done something to change that?
I've encountered it not necessarily with a specific client, but in general, because it's real, and I love the fact that you made the connection that is a freeze response. Sometimes it helps to have someone come in and name what it is that's going on, to say like, hey, you're not, something isn't wrong with you. Like, you're having a reaction to something going on in the environment, and this is your nervous system's way of saying, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I'm overwhelmed right now. It doesn't mean I might not be good, this evening or a week from now or next month, but just in this moment, I'm overwhelmed. And the wisest thing to do might be to shut down. So it's real.
It is. Absolutely it is. And the thing is, I see it as a coach all the time. And my biggest thing is, that's why I like to have conversations with mental health professionals. Because even though I have the experience, I'm not here to go down to the depths with you in that pain, in that trauma. I recognize it, especially because I've gone through my own trauma. But what I need you to do is find a solution, tap into that thing, talk to someone, understand where it comes from, and then we can talk about solutions. Because until then, we can't work on decision making. We can't work on your success. We can't work on you leveling up in your career. We can't work on you even becoming an entrepreneur, because the things that were faulty while you were in corporate, they're gonna follow you into entrepreneurship.
Facts.
So I think that you helping people untangle those thoughts and really start to talk about it, and then we, when I say we, like me and my clients, we can talk about the actual corporate experiences that you're going through, so you can now tie it to, this is what's happening in my brain.
Yes. And
I'm not gonna let it sabotage my success. I think that's why we are teammates.
Come on now.
Right? We out here helping people from both sides. So you said this earlier, helping professionals find their way into their field. One of the reasons you said is because they've identified with a situation like a traumatic situation. A lot of social workers were in defects. They were in foster care, right? And they become social workers. Now, for you, I would love for you to help me understand what's that personal situation for you that you identify with, that you also see in your clients, that helps you help them.
Perfectionism, wanting to be perfect, or feeling the need to be perfect. Taking on more than is yours to bear, so to speak.
Where do you think you got that from?
Some of it may just be personality. I think some of it's personality. I don't know.
The perfectionism, and the previous guest helped me see that my perfectionism might have stemmed from growing up with my mom and slamming dishes if stuff was not going right. I'm just you got to make it all right. Yeah. Did you connect your perfectionism with either a childhood event or high school or even young professional event? Yeah.
I would definitely say childhood. Growing up, there were good times, there were bad times. There were times where it was stable. There were times where it was unstable. And I think I read the times that were unstable as a commentary on me, who I was. So there was a part of me that's I'm going to be perfect to prevent things being bad or things being unstable. So I think it came from that, or I would say I know that it came from that, to have things sometimes be okay but not be okay, and me thinking that somehow was a reflection directly on me, instead of realizing oh well, life is hard, adults can get stressed, that can show up in a lot of different ways, and as a kid that has nothing to do with you. But to not be able to know that or articulate it or have that light bulb go on, I think turned into, well, I'll just be perfect, and then things won't be as challenging or as bad. So I think that's the root. It sounds similar to mine. I definitely resonate. And for you now, everyone says a therapist needs to have a therapist, a coach needs to have a coach. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you are now facing as an entrepreneur that just continues to be one of your things that you work on professionally or professional development wise? I would say the I'm an introvert. You're an ENFP. I'm an INFP. It's much easier for me to just be in the back. Like, working with a client, whether that's an individual client or a corporate client, to metaphorically speaking, like, do this and hold space for someone else. And it's a growth edge to be like, well, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be the one that's more, active and directive and being seen and out there. So that's the growth edge. It feels scary and good at the same time, if that makes sense.
It
like,
does.
oh, okay, well, you're going to be in a Work and Play podcast and it's going to be on YouTube and people are going to see it. But it's like, well, the way I make sense of it is, one, it's a personal growth edge. It's a professional growth edge. And to do the work that you love to do, that's calling work, that's purpose-driven work, and it actually really helps people, you have to be seen more and like be out there. Like there's, you can't be off to the side and have the impact that you want or that I really want. So that's the biggest growth edge is the visibility piece. So. Yeah,
and I was gonna ask, what are you doing to challenge that? But obviously we're in a social experiment as we speak. Who knew that we were gonna be doing this? I didn't know, but I'm facilitating a little bit of your growth right now.
That's it.
I love it.
And thank you for that. Yeah,
I love it. I didn't know that, but I love it because you are doing it very well. I love it. There was a question that I had, and sometimes I get a brain fart because I get super excited about one thing, and then I'm like, but it's about your journey as an entrepreneur and your growth. And if I find it, if I figure it out again, then I'm gonna ask it. Okay. But if I don't, then it may or may not come back. But it did come back.
Okay, come on.
Yay! Okay, so, so it's the aspect of your job that, and typically I wouldn't even ask this question, but I think that being a therapist, like finding your way, and through your story, you've kind of just heed the calling time and time again, right? What's the best part about what you do that a lot of people don't get a chance to do? Like, and this is me asking a very ego-driven question. Like, what's the part about, like, the fun part about your job that people would be jealous about?
Wow. What is the part that people be jealous about? Can I answer it a different way?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something people would be jealous about, but one of the most rewarding, if not the most rewarding piece, is seeing people do our healing work that taps them or us back into the depth of our power and our wholeness. Like healing is, I'm on a healing journey, which is great, but sometimes people think that that's, in perpetuity, like it's never going to stop. Like I'm always healing. Eventually healing is a path to wholeness, and wholeness is our birthright, like untakeawayable wholeness. So to see people, do that healing that taps them or us into like our wholeness and our power, so that when they show up, whether it's professionally, personally, family, friends, community, however they're showing up, they are showing up in their power, and they're coming from their wholeness and not their woundedness. Yeah, that's.
So it sounds like what you're saying is seeing people live their full selves, impacting other people to live their full self, and that's what you enjoy about what you do. And the reason that you say they or us is because you also realize people do that for you.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh Lord. I love it. I really do. Because, like I can go all the way in there, but then I'm like, okay, so how do we break that down in layman's terms? Because I'm a very experiential person. Even though, like, when you and I talk, we can geek out about like the literature of it all, the theory of it all. But I'm a very much experiential person. Yeah. And the way that I learn mental health is through feeling it and how it makes me feel, and to see it. And I love analogies. So that's why as you're talking, I'm like, let me paint a picture for myself. Because as you talk about the best part about your life, it's just that you get to impact others, and others are impacted, and they impact others. Yes. Impact.
Like you can see it. It's beautiful. You can see it. You can feel it. this isn't necessarily every, you know, client session in terms of, you know, individual clients, but there's sometimes it was like we in the session and I'm like, my clients are dope. Like they're getting it. Like I'm excited because I'm seeing people, quote unquote, do the work and, you know, and feel better. And like when they're done, they're like, yeah, no, it's nothing like it.
Nothing.
Absolutely
nothing. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Where do you think you would be if you hadn't made the decision to go to Athens to get that counseling degree?
Ooh. If I had made the decision to go to Athens to get the counseling degree, maybe working in corporate, like quote unquote, just, you know, W-2, just a corporate employee, you know, maybe doing HR or I'm not sure. I mean, it wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the point that, you know, really we have to look at in hindsight that changes our lives. Because when we're not happy, we're faced with a decision that we could make and a life that could possibly happen and then the life that we currently have. And so what's really impactful about what you said is essentially if you never made the decision to grow your life, you'd be exactly where you were before you made the decision.
Yeah.
And so it's not even a regretful type of question. It's just what it is. If you had never made the decision, think about the life that you wouldn't, and the lives that you wouldn't be able to impact.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about when I ask you that question. Like the decision that the life that was on the line if you had made the decision.
Yeah.
And then when you think about your own transformation, how would you say you've most transformed as a person?
Your questions are on point. I think I said this, you know, before now. Questions are on point, like ballerinas. So one, I want to give you your flowers. The biggest one, the most prevalent, prescient, alive one is, and it's been like this year, is, it may sound corny or hokey, but like owning my power, like fully. To be in a helping profession, counselor, therapist, social worker, nurse, helping or service professions, a lot of times they say just focus on other people and you just want to give. And it's great, it's laudable, it's beautiful, it's necessary, but and there's got to be, like, we have to give from our wholeness. Like, we have to give from our abundance almost. And for me, it's been a process of saying you have to balance the giving, which you love to do, with like owning the depth of power that's in here. Sometimes we associate negative things with power because we see people misuse power, abuse power. So I think for me, seeing people misuse it or abuse it made my relationship with it be almost this, like, well, I don't, I'm not trying to be too powerful because I don't want to be that person over there that's hurting people or doing bad things. And it's like, I had to realize, like, that's a story. And the story doesn't serve you. Like, what serves you is owning this so that you can help in the deepest, most powerful ways, in the most transformative ways. So, and again, that's like this year, it's like, that's been the newest discovery, uncovering. It's like, you have to own it. And when you do it, it lets other people know that it's possible. It can be done in ways that are healthy, that are balanced, that give other people permission to like own their own power. Like the world doesn't benefit from you playing small, so to speak. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest growth lesson in 2022.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And I love how you take pauses before you answer. Like you got that one. You pulled that one. 'Cause that one spoke to me. Big time. Goodness. Okay, God, I hear you. Okay, that's one of those, like, okay, I hear you. That's big. That's really, really big. I can't not help but thank you over and over for being on the podcast. For one, it's like, I really do think coaches and therapists are like great teammates. And I don't think that it happens, the institutions don't set it up this way. I've identified that there's a great connection between the mental work that you do and identifying like what are the quirks and what is the brain telling you and then the practical application. You know what I mean? Because as a therapist, you don't go out there and walk the journey. But as a coach, I can't sit down there and really get deep into the hard ish. We both are needed, and people need these guides to walk along the journey.
Yes.
So I wholeheartedly encourage people to find a therapist that fits, and find a coach that fits. Oh, but you know what? I have a question. This will be my last question before we close out. But how would you suggest people find the right counselor, the right coach? How would you suggest people go about that?
Wow, the great question. Let me answer broad before answering specific. The broad is, and this is a challenge the world is facing, the profession's facing, is there's more demand than supply. Like there's not enough therapists and counselors that are in graduate school and moving into the profession to meet the demand that's already here, and that most of the research says is going to increase, where people are saying, I need some help now. That being said, there's different things. There's websites that are databases that people can go to. The Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Girls, Therapy for Black Men, the Counseling Brothers of Atlanta. There are a lot of different, kind of online directories that people can go to. Sometimes word of mouth. I will say that in addition to those tangible steps, and it's just my own experience, sometimes people are going through and they're looking at directories and they're clicking and you're looking at this person's credentials or this person's picture, or they look nice, and sometimes you know when you know. Like you may see a person online, but when you're actually whether in person or on the teletherapy session, it doesn't connect. It doesn't hit. There's not something that says yes. And then sometimes you're like, I clicked on them and we're going to talk, but I'm not necessarily thinking I want to rock with them. But you end up meeting them, and there's something inside that says, and it's hard to put into words, but something inside says either I can trust this person, or I think they can really help me, or they can help me with this aspect or this thing that I've been carrying. Like they can hold it. Other people can hold it. They can hold it. Yeah. And it's it's that, what they call it, that small, subtle voice. So I guess I'm saying to say, in addition to look at the directories, trust that, because that, in my experience, is powerful. It's invaluable.
I feel like that was I feel like you answered it in a way that a lot of married people talk about finding their spouse. And I'm going on a bit of a pivot because the trusting yourself, I think we should touch on intuition a bit. One, because I think people navigate their careers without that trust in their gut. But then two, you somehow, the way you describe it, and I agree, but I would also like to break it down, because I realize everybody doesn't have that strong trust in their intuition. Have you always had a level of trust, or did you have to build that trust in your own gut?
Both. It was always there, and I have had to and continue to work to trust it all the time, or more often than not. So it's both. I would never say it was never not there. It's always been there, and it has also been the process of not trusting it and then being like, okay, well, you learned something here, right. So next time go left instead of going right. So it's both, actually. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. I've enjoyed you on this on this episode.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's been dope. For those of us who are watching and listening, I think that they're either looking at you like, hey, I'd like to work with them.